To those fortunate enough to be able to work and quarantine at home during the pandemic, there has been a chance to read, watch and listen to all the research and art you've always claimed you'd consume, but you never seem to find the time. If you're searching for a book that will help you look inward, teach you race or strong leadership, discuss sorrow, or just make you laugh, this brief but solid list is a good start to your quarantine reading. Untamed by Glennon Doyle. Because much of the planet has been quarantined, many of us find ourselves with newfound time, to think. To imagine the kind of person we want to be on the other side of the pandemic. In Doyle's third memoir, she is an expert witness of her metamorphosis over the last few years. And details how she recognized, confronted, and conquered the internal and external barriers that prevented her from being the truest, most unvarnished version of herself. She ended her marriage to her son, fell in love with a woman, married her, and built a new family with her ex-husband and their French Weiner dog. Doyle is an unrelenting advocate of all people, but particularly women, listening to their voices and living their lives on their own terms. So you want to talk about Race by Ijeoma Oluo. Protests and violence have broken out across the world as a result of systematic political violence and the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. In the face of racism and structural injustice that America faces, now is a good time to read Oluo's if you want to think about race. Her book deals with everything from police brutality to mass incarceration. This also discusses how you're coping with complicated race interactions, like how can you convince your roommate that her joke was racist? Oluo's book goes where few will venture, frank discussions about race, and how racism affects all facets of American life. The Splendid and the Vile by Erik Larson. There has been a marked lack of effective and capable foreign leaders in the midst of this global pandemic. This absence is never more obvious than when you read The Splendid and the Vile, Erik Larson's book on Winston Churchill's darkest moments as Prime Minister. As he took office for the first time, Hitler occupied the Netherlands and Belgium, Poland and Czechoslovakia had fallen, the risky evacuation of Dunkirk had been 2 weeks away, and the Americans were far from participating in the battle. Larson records Churchill's charm, bravery, and strong leadership, bringing hope to his readers throughout history. Finding Meaning, The Sixth Stage of Grief by David Kessler. Citizens all over the world are mourning the loss of loved ones, the loss of greed, or other factors. In the midst of grieving the death of his youngest son, author, and specialist on death and grief, David Kessler recognized that the widely accepted 5 stages of grief were not appropriate. The 5th stage, acceptance, seemed like an unfinished process. He realized that he needed to find meaning, and therefore introduced the 6th stage. Kessler expresses his experience, knowledge, and methods to help those who have lost their lives in this stressful and unusual moment. Wow, No Thank You by Samantha Irby. Upon digesting the damage caused by the COVID-19 and being in quarantine for months, one thing we're in desperate need of is a big belly laugh. Irby feeds our soul in her funny and frank series of essays, Yeah, No Thank You. She's chronicling her rising frustration with her body as she turns 40, becoming a famous writer, being courted by Hollywood TV executives, getting married, moving out of Chicago to a small Midwestern city where she can have a garden and a house, and go on an uncomfortable new friend's date. Readers are going to wish they were quarantining with Irby.